Good morning, Gamecock fans. Welcome into Coffee with JC Shurburtt. Today is Friday, August 1st, the year of our Lord 2025. Thank you for joining me this morning. Talk a little Gamecock football as always. Certainly happy that you folks have decided to join me. It's always a pleasure to get up and talk about the Gamecocks, right? Uh, the first day of fall camp is today, the Gamecocks open practice. Um, Kind of got here quick. I thought July kind of rushed by. But like I said yesterday, it'll get slow here in a couple of weeks. But certainly that first day of practice is always exciting because you know the season's right around the corner. 30 days from today, South Carolina will be kicking off the 2025 season in Atlanta. It's a highly anticipated year. The Gamecocks are supposed to be ranked, probably, I mean, in all likelihood, unless some of those voters in the AP poll are just, I don't know, haters, I guess. There's a hater. There's a few haters out there. SEC haters, not necessarily South Carolina, but I think the Gamecocks will be ranked in the preseason. You'll see a ranked team go to Atlanta to play Virginia Tech in the opener. Um, and you sort of start to look around the roster now because it gets real, during fall camp. The spring is fundamentally different than fall because you're kind of on a race against the clock. If you're a coach, you're out there trying to figure out who's going to play, who's going to be on special teams, who's going to be in your two deep, who's going to redshirt if that's applicable. That gets less and less these days. Case in point, Shane Beamer was talking yesterday at media day and said Cutter Woods was in the mix to be the holder. Well, if he's a holder, he can't redshirt. So it's less frequent. Redshirting is a good thing, and you see a lot of guys also take redshirts later, like Big Tree did last year. So we're not necessarily living in the same world in college football that we used to. And then you have guys come in from the portal. Guys have injuries and they redshirt, that kind of thing. One interesting thing Beamer said yesterday too. He was asked about the offensive line, and we're just going to go through some of the news and notes heading into fall camp, positions to watch, all that kind of stuff today. A lot of football today on Coffee, like nitty gritty football stuff. He was mentioning about the offensive linemen in last offseason and how this offseason was a little different because, like last year, they have a drill where they hit the sled. The offensive linemen do good drill. I mean, it's a football thing that's been going on for a long time. And he said, when guys are nursing injuries, they have modified workouts. In other words, so if you were pushing a sled that's 500 pounds, if everybody else is doing that, that's healthy, maybe if you're injured, it's two, that kind of thing, 250, something like that. And he mentioned that Marquis Anderson and Tree Babalade last offseason were a little banged up and didn't really get the full effect of that, but they did this offseason. And that helps with an offensive line, especially those guys. I mean, think about last year, they were going into their second seasons. I think that's probably what led to a red shirt for Tree. If I remember correctly, at the start of fall camp last year, he was kind of in street clothes or shorts, and he wasn't working out. Our guys at thebigspur.com caught that at the start of last training camp. So, there's something to kind of factor in your mind when you're talking about the offensive line is that maybe some of these guys that are going to be pretty good, have been sidelined by injuries. I know nobody wants to hear about injuries on the offensive line as it relates to last year after we went through 2023. But I thought that was interesting. I was like, well, that makes sense because if you're an offensive lineman and you're young, and that is a um, physically taxing position. You have to be strong. You have to have strength. You can be as big as you want, but if you're not strong, you're going to get dominated and overwhelmed. And, you're probably not going to start or not be that good, as far as your competition within the team. So, looking at that, it may make a little sense as to why Marquis Anderson had 45 snaps and Tree redshirted last season. Good point about Trevon Ball from Beamer yesterday too, up front, that he's really worked hard to reshape and turn some of the weight from fat to muscle and stuff like that. Boy, I could use that right now. and he's still 330 or whatever. So that's good for Ball. And again, he was kind of pressed into action as a true freshman, and then played mostly special teams last season as a backup to Torricelli Simpkins. So some encouraging notes there. I think at that particular spot, which is going to be talked about, and which is going to be a question mark until it's not. I mean, I say all the time it's never going to be perfect up there, but there's a difference between it's never going to be perfect and it's a liability, and Sellers is running for his life, and you can't get a run game going with the backs, and can't get a playoff, can't get a deep ball off because you can't hold up in protection. And that's something, too, I'll add that to kind of think about is, with the deep passes, look, they didn't throw a whole ton of deep passes last year. But when they got him off, Lenoris is a good deep ball thrower. And when they got him off, I'm thinking Missouri. I think of the play against Alabama, 4th and 10, which, I think that play may have turned the season around, if I'm being honest. I know they lost the game, but to that point, South Carolina had been outscored 41-3 over the course of like almost 6 quarters against SEC competition. So that that obviously was a big one. Mazeo Bennett catching the touchdown in Tuscaloosa started a run of 19 straight points, that kind of thing. But when you can't protect, you can't throw it deep. I don't care who you are, because those require drops and time to develop. Because a receiver's got to get down the field, right? It's science. So anyway, um, so that's going to be an important position because I do think that with the players they have at receiver and Lenoris's arm talent, that you could make some things happen in the vertical passing game this year pretty frequently. Those are, touchdowns, long plays, that kind of thing. So we'll see what happens there. But encouraging notes from Shane Beamer yesterday on that. So we'll start with the offensive side of the ball. We just talked about the line. Yeah, I don't know. I'll switch to tight ends real quick. I don't know what I thought Michael Smith played really well for a true freshman last year. Got some starts. I don't know what he's been doing in the weight room, but eyeball test wise, I saw a picture of him the other day. And my goodness, this guy, Georgia had. I know they had Brock Bowers, and he obviously was a stud. But they had some other guys. They had this guy from Vegas. It was like a power forward in basketball, just a freak looking guy. And that's Michael Smith looks like that now. I mean, this guy, listed at 6'6", 248, something like that. And man, oh man, if he can get going this year, obviously they're replacing Josh Simon, and Michael's a different player than Josh, but that guy can be really good. Brady Hunt's had a great offseason. I've mentioned Jordan Dingle. Mike Tyler's there, Maurice Brown the second, who I think can do some different things. That room's looking pretty good. Going to be interesting to me how the reps kind of shake out. I think heading in, it's probably Smith and Hunt. They're kind of different. Hunt's a little more of an attached tight end than Smith. They can all do different things. And then Dingle and then Brown. But Brown, I think, will play, some of that lead blocker role and be useful, and also on special teams as well. That guy can play teams. He blocked the punt last year, skied. I can't believe Brian Kelly, the LSU coach, called that a illegal play. After all that, refereeing wise in the game, he's going to gripe about it. But anyway, it's a good room. So I think that's coming along nicely. The wide receivers, interesting listening to Nick Harbor yesterday talk about kind of not only himself, and Beamer talked about Harbor too. And so, the question is what's changed? And there's a lot of route running talk. And that's important, because if you don't run precise routes, and I think last season, given the kind of, parade of injuries that happened and people coming in and out of the lineup, and nothing that kept guys out for forever for the whole season, but a lot of new players, and then they were kind of in one, they were up 2 games, down 2 games, that kind of thing. Jared Brown comes to mind. he got off to a pretty good start and then kind of disappeared. Well, then Vandrevius Jacobs kind of was doing some things, and then he got hurt and disappeared. And Gage Larvinahan, who's no longer there, he was in and out of the lineup as well. Nick Harbor played, but he didn't really get going until about midseason. So, with Nick specifically, he just seems to be in a good spot mentally to go perform at the position and learn. But yeah, he was talking, Jared Brown. I mentioned him. Obviously, I don't think he had the season he wanted to have. Mike Fury's mentioned in the offseason that becoming, kind of like Harbor in the sense that, playing the position, mastering the position was important because at Coastal Carolina, he was kind of they used him like Debo Samuel a little bit, like the 49ers used him in the sense that like a lot of his touches were at the line of scrimmage, almost like a running back. And, they did that some with him. And I think they would have probably done it more had he been consistently healthy. Last year, early on, that little reverse to him was popping out. He'd get 8 to 10 yards every time. But, learning how to be more of a complete wide receiver with him, and Harbor mentioned about Brown, what kind of sets him apart is getting in and out of his breaks. I can see that. I can see that kind of skill set there, the quickness that kind of falls into route running a little bit. And he mentioned Mazio Bennett and Brian Rowe and hands and their ability to catch the ball spot on. That's what I've seen from those two. And I think when you look at the receiving room, Donovan Murph to me is kind of a wild card. Uh, didn't have the spring, but ultra talented. I know they're hoping he can go play this year. And then an emerging player, obviously, is Vendrevius Jacobs. I don't know if you caught it on the morning show. JB talked to a contact source within the program, right? And I've heard the same kind of thing that Jacobs has really matured and taken a step up. And, he's the Palm Beach County Player of the Year down in South Florida. That's a place that produces a ton of receivers. I know the feedback we got from Florida State when we were kind of asking our contacts there at thebigspur.com when he entered the portal and came was that it's not talent. This guy's really good. And he had a good spring game too. That's sometimes it's a curse to have a good spring game because there's been guys that have good spring games that we don't hear from. But I'm optimistic about him. It's going to be a good competition. And the good news about receivers is you kind of rotate about 6 a game. That's ideal. Maybe 7 if you're just loaded or you got a lot of guys. Last year, they probably had to rotate a little more than they wanted to again because of the injuries in and out and things like that. But, this is a spot that I think Carolina can show dramatic improvement. And I don't think there has to be one guy. I've seen, it's kind of funny that people talk about, the need for this wide receiver one and all that. But, you look at the two schools that have Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams, Alabama and Ohio State, they have other receivers that are really good too. And what that does is you pick your poison. If you're bracketing the other guy or the star that you're not going to let beat you, the other guy can step up and do it. In the Spurrier years that were really, really good, I know there was Alshon Jeffrey in 2011, but 12 and 13, it was a mix. You had Ellington, you had Ace Sanders there for a while. You had Nick Jones, who was really good. They used the tight ends. It wasn't, I would guess that Bruce Ellington, 2012, 2013 would have been probably the number one receiver, technically, the guy that you said you had to stop. But I mean, he got drafted and stuff. But Ace Sanders was right there too. And, those guys were good players, really good players. But they didn't have an Alshon Jeffrey, or it wasn't like Pharaoh Cooper when he caught 70 passes, or, you know, moving forward. I mean, some of the Muschamp teams had Edwards and Shi Smith and Debo. Debo obviously is a dude, right? Brian Edwards is good too, so is Shi Smith. So I think the more the better. And you don't have to have, I mean, Carolina did have a star receiver in 2023, caught 70 something passes, and they went 5-7. And I think that season could have turned out a little differently had Juice Wells played, and then they had two. So I like the fact that and look with the receivers too. We've talked all off season. We usually talk about 7, 8 guys. Maybe it's just three. We'll see how it goes. Maybe some of these guys aren't going to be impact players, and maybe they are role players and reserves. But you have three that are really good. That's going to help Lenore Sellers out quite a bit. So I think this position is trending up and is only going to get better. Just like Beamer said yesterday, everybody talks about this season and all that. And yeah, if it goes well, I think Lenore Sellers is off to the NFL at quarterback. That would obviously is an irreplaceable player. But South, if you look around the roster, I mean, it is a team, whereas last year's team skewed older, this year's team does skew younger, which means some of these guys are going to be here for a while. And you look, and there's some really good, really talented players that will not start this year, that will be back next year. So I think that's encouraging. I think the future is bright, and I don't even want to think about 2026 right now because I don't want to think about. We had football last night, Hall of Fame game, and I don't want to think about the fact there will be a time coming up here in what, 6 months where there will be no football. So I don't want to think about that right now. But you look around the roster, and the future's right. I mean, bright. Brent Pry, the coach at Virginia Tech, talked about Carolina briefly at ACC Media Days and said they've recruited well, and they have. I mean, you look around, and this is a different roster than it was when Beamer took over, a much different one. So excited about the receiving core. That's going to be a nice battle to see who the three starters are on my projected depth chart. Because it is a competition, and because I like just about all of the players in the room. I went with Harbor and Brown and Bennett to be the three in a three wide set. Who knows what Mike Shulo is going to do? He may come out with a two back look. He may come out with a double tight look. And then those are technically your starters. It's not like the third receiver is a starter on the depth chart, but he's, they didn't actually start him. That's one of those quirky football stat things, but very high on this group now and probably into the future. I will say this about the years after Sellers, and you don't know what's going to happen at quarterback, and Carolina's recruited some mobile guys there. So I don't know the quarterback run game's going anywhere at this particular program. But Carolina's setting itself up, with all this talent at receiver, and then you got Sequel Patterson coming in to be able to really throw the football in the future. Now you got to run the ball, but I think that the passing game future is pretty good shape. So you got that right there. Running back, obviously waiting on Rasul Faison and that decision. Beamer said they're just going to continue like he's eligible until they're told otherwise. And again, with him, I don't buy the fact, or the fact, it's not a fact. I don't buy the opinion that, 2 or 3 wins are based on him being eligible. I think he's really good. I think he's the top of the depth chart. But I like the other guys too. Rasul actually said it. Go listen. Do yourself a favor. Savell Newton interviewed Rasul Faison for 1801 Media. That's out there on social media. It's on Savell's media account, also 1801 Media. That's part of Garnet Trust. So every time you view it, it helps NIL at Carolina. But Rasul mentioned, he's like, look, even if I'm not eligible, South Carolina's going to be fine. There's some players in the room, and I agree with him. I agree there's depth. But because of his skill set and because he does everything really well, and again, shout out to Clint in the Nana Sports chat box on the show. He pointed out that and I didn't think about this, and he's right, because my thing is this with the running backs is if they don't block up front, especially on the interior, you're not going to get the production out of that position that you want. I don't care if it's Oscar Attaway, Isaiah Augustov, Isa. Wow, JC. Jawan Howell or Matt Fuller. It's about the only one I see consistently that can go into a pile and fall forward. And I say consistently, hadn't seen much of him, is Fuller. But they all need blocking. Now, the difference with Faison, again, and I mentioned this, is what he can do at the second level of the defense, making DBs miss. Excellent pass catcher out of the backfield. Just a really good all around player. I think he can make a difference for this team this year. Is it going to be the difference in 11 wins and 10 wins or 8 wins and 7 wins? No. I don't think that, because you can still get production from these other guys as long as you have what blocking. But obviously a night and day difference as far as the room goes. Really, it's been that way the last 2 years compared to 2023, where it went from not ideal to bad to worse. It was basically more a hobbled Mario Anderson at the end, and I think everybody else was hurt. But on that note, Mario Anderson had a really good year that year. Looking back on it, kind of wish he'd have stayed around. But they may not have gotten Howell otherwise. But I think last year with Rocket, he could have been RB2 and done a really good job. But he went off to Memphis and continues his story. And I think his story is a great one. South Carolina kid, lightly recruited, goes to Newberry and D2, and now here you go. So it's a good job by him back then. But this room's so much different. It's so much better. Hopefully they get Rasul Faison eligible though, because I do believe, and even though I'm not like buying the hyperbolic, it's the whole season whether or not he gets eligible thing. I do think he's quite good. I do think he's the starter, maybe even the clear starter. And although there will be competition, I do think that I do think he can make a difference for this team this year in a number of areas too. Plus, the guy, I mean, has been through so much. And again, go listen to that interview. I mean, he's going to come out with his hair on fire. You want to talk about a guy that can, that is hungry, that's older, that's going to give it all he's got, because he knows this is, if he gets this opportunity, I mean, it's probably it. You got to get out there and do your thing and chase your dream. And he's good enough to do so. So I think a running back's in really good shape. All these positions are in good shape. There are questions. Because again, and I think a lot of the fans have figured this out too. Again, you don't know until you know when you go play games. Mike Shula, offensive coordinator, was talking about that with Lenore Sellers, that, they asked him if the game had slowed down. He's like, well, that's determined really during the games. And it is. Because you really can't ever simulate it in practice, what the game is like. The good news is when Lenoris trots out there in Atlanta in 30 days, it's not like the Old Dominion game where he was out there starting for the first time in front of his family and friends and, an hour from his house in Gamecock Nation, highly anticipating his debut and all that. It's a high pressure situation because it's a neutral site game indoors. I'm not sure Lenore Sellers ever played a game inside in a dome. I don't think South Florence played in a dome, and they haven't played in a dome so far. So that's a little different. Big stage, neutral site, probably I would think a 55-45 Gamecock crowd, maybe 60-40. Virginia Tech travels. They're going to be, I think a lot of them are showing up to see Beamer coach against them. So it's not going to be a walk in the park. The Hokies are getting ready for this opener. They're a proud program. They've shocked teams before in the opener. It wasn't under Brent Pry. It was under Frank Beamer. But remember that Ohio State game a couple of years ago when they went to Columbus and won. So, you just never know. It's a little bit of a scary opener for the Gamecocks. But that's when you're going to kind of determine, has the game slowed down for Sellers and what kind of progress he's made and things like that. But he seems confident. Shula seems confident in him. Beamer and Shula both kind of confirmed what we've been talking about. Luke Doty right now is the backup quarterback heading into fall, but they were clear to say, Aaron Nolan and Cutter Woods are working hard and coming along, but they had just gotten there, and That's kind of it. If you want to specifically about Aaron Nolan, my understanding is this is just what they said. He just got there. There's always an adjustment period. He's a left-handed quarterback. It's not that he's bad. It's just that in the spring, he probably was kind of swimming a little bit. You're learning a new system. You're, out there competing with other guys, and same with Cutter Woods. Although there is the holder aspect of Cutter out there. So, who knows who will be the backup once we start with fall camp. Aaron Nolan's got a lot of arm talent, a lot, can really throw the football. And so we'll see kind of how all that goes with the backup quarterback job. But right now it's Luke Doty, and I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing at all. Some may disagree, and that's fine. But I think that having an older guy as the backup that's played a lot of ball, that has talent at quarterback. I mean, it's not like Luke Doty. I think a lot of people are remembering the broken-footed being coached by Marcus Satterfield, Luke Doty. I don't know that that's a fair comparison. So I think he'll be fine if he has to go in the game. Hopefully he doesn't. Hopefully when he goes in the game, it's going to be because the Gamecocks are far ahead, and he gets out there and gets a chance to have some PT. So offensively, South Carolina's personnel, it's good. Obviously, you got to get the interior job squared away. If Faison is not eligible, and I hate to even say that because I just can't envision a world where he's not, but the decision hasn't been made. That job for the starting running backs position is going to be interesting. Oscar Attaway is probably the leader in the clubhouse, if no Faison, but behind him, who's going to get the other carries? Gustav is a newcomer that they're high on, obviously led Colorado in rushing. You got Jawarn Howell, Matthew Fuller back there. Bradley Dunn, the walk-on, scored a touchdown against Wofford last year. I thought he was at eligibility, but he's not. He's got some, there's another walk-on named Larry Scott that's pretty good too. Did some things in the spring game 2 years ago I liked, but I don't know. I think it's going to be obviously one of the four scholarship guys. And Attaway's worked extremely hard this summer. He's a leader on the football team. Thought again his best games were his last two. So we'll see how it goes if Faison's not eligible. We'll also cross that bridge when we come to it. I'm not believing that they won't be. So that's got to be figured out. Wide receivers, great competition. We mentioned backup quarterback. In another on offensive line too, we talk about the interior jobs a lot, but there's going to be if Tree Babalade is really just a tackle, then and not a guard, and he's not winning the guard job. I can't sit here and tell you that and Josiah Thompson, Beamer mentioned him. He's worked really hard this all season, putting on bulk and stuff, and I don't know that it's likely that he gets beaten out, but he could at left tackle. And then at right tackle, you got Case and Henry and Big Tree battling it out. I know half the fan base wants to put Case and Henry on the bench, and there's like a gulf of like opinions. Like the coaching staff loves the guy. It's high on him. There's no question. He's returning starter at tackle, second year as a starter. The fan base is ready to put Big Tree in there. And I don't know why. There's players that have come along like that through the years. Heck, I've had players that through the years, a lot of coaches where I'm like, why do they have this guy and not that guy? I think I was that way to a certain extent about left guard last year, but there's always a reason, and Beamer mentioning that sled hitting thing, like, well, these guys didn't get in all the work over the summer because they were hurt. Well, that makes sense on the offensive line. Again, because that's how you get stronger and better. And you talk about development, that's how you develop. So, we'll see kind of what happens. But, that's to me on the O-line, it's like I wrote an article in the spring about this on Big Spur called The Big Tree Conundrum. That's it. I mean, because I think he's one of the five best. But where is he going to start? It's a mystery. So the offense has a chance to be pretty good this year. They're putting in a new system. when Mike Shula got the job, my opinion was just keep it going. The offense, shoot, the Sellers is learning the Dowell login system and got better and better as the season goes on. There's a lot of crossover there, but it is a new system. And Mike Shula's going to call his offense. There's a lot of reasons for that. Um, you know, Number one, I think when you have a coach that's, coached for, 2 or 3 decades, and you're asking him to call your offense, you need to have his system in. My understanding is that it's not, you're not reverting back to the Satterfield days where you were just overwhelming players mentally, and you can't play football like that. You can't. I mean, you want to know why Carolina's offense those years at times looked like a dumpster fire and at times looked like a well-oiled machine. It usually depended on how complex and how many stupid changes they made during the week, or he made during the week. And that's just the bottom line. Nobody in college football can do that. Nobody can't do it. Couldn't do it at Alabama. Nick Saban wouldn't have done that. As many NFL offensive coordinators as he had. Brian Daboll was his offensive coordinator for a year. They won the national championship. Brian Daboll had one of the best play calls ever that I've ever seen to win it at that stadium Carolina's playing with Tua to Devontae Smith, freshman to freshman that year. So he's back in the NFL doing good. So, it's not always that NFL guys just want to make it complex. But my understanding is based on intel, and then also what Shula said was that they're not going. I mean, Shula basically said in the spring they just repped their base plays over and over and over again to get the foundation in. What are you good at? Let's get to do that a bunch and make sure we have that done. And I'll tell you another coach that did that, pretty good offensive coach, and that's Steve Spurrier. That was, I mean, people don't realize that because Spurrier's offense has always looked like that he reinvented the wheel every week, and he didn't. What they had was, his playbook wasn't even that thick. And they had different names, steamers, wheelies, Mills, awesome. The Bandit was the tight end, Bandit, right? Whatever. After the Tampa Bay Bandits. But what he would do, maybe he would put in one special play during the week that he saw on film. I'll tell you, one of them was the Marcus Lattimore screen pass touchdown against Bama in 2010 when Gary Danielson swore it was a penalty, and it wasn't. Almost a penalty, but it wasn't. Marcus really did a great job on that route. They put that in that week, if it was for Alabama, because if we do this, it's a touchdown. Sure enough, it was. So maybe one play a while. But what he would do was during the week, they would rep these things, the plays, actual plays over and over and over till they got it down cold because they were precise routes and things like that. And then, there's a difference between plays and formations. You can run the same play out of 16 different formations. He would switch the formations up every week, sometimes randomly. Well, shoot, we're gonna run it out of the gun with 4 wides this time, but same concept, same play, and that would just confuse teams even more. So don't go thinking Mike Shula's going to have this vanilla offense with not very many plays. It's not creative. I think he's doing it the college way based on what he said, which is you got to make sure these guys get the base down, and then you add, and then you do things formationally. And I thought last year Dowell Loggins did a pretty good job with different formations and things like that. I mean, if you kind of think about like Texas A&M versus Vandy versus Missouri, kind of, and that's kind of standard these days. But so I didn't want you to think that, Shula's not putting anything in, blah blah blah. It's not going to be a good. No, it's going to be fine. Defensively, here's some of the best news. And the summer of Sean continues. Sean Murphy, the Florida State transfer that started off at Alabama. They're asking Clayton White about leadership yesterday, and he mentioned Sean being an older guy, if he has a fiance, that kind of some of the same things. I mean, I'm not naive and not sunshine and rainbow pumping here to say, Sean Murphy's going to replace Demetrius Knight leadership wise. Everybody's different. And Demetrius Knight's special. in that regard. But he did say Sean Murphy's taken over kind of as a leader because he's older, and the running back, the linebacker room is young. Justin Okoronkwo is a redshirt freshman. Fred Johnson's a redshirt freshman. Jerron Willis is an older player. He's been there. And then the rest of them are true freshmen or walk-ons. So it's a young room Clayton White has at linebacker. And so to have a guy you've brought in from the portal that can emerge as a leader, that's good. And kind of like what I said with Faison, Murphy, I mean, this is his time. This is his time. He was a highly rated recruit. Left Bama for Florida State. I think he may have left after Saban did, and didn't play 3-4 games last year. 15 tackles at Florida State on a team that was going nowhere. Performed pretty well, and then now he ends up at South Carolina. Virginia kid, I think Manassas, Northern Virginia, Nova. And so hey, great. I thought Justin O would probably take the job. Projected him to before spring. After spring, switched it to Murphy, and I still think that. And I think that the leadership stuff, and then the fact that a lot of other players are starting to talk about him is good. He's 6'3", 231, so he's a big guy. And you start talking about him and Fred Johnson, again, both from Virginia. Johnson's from the 757, heading to play the in-state school in Atlanta. It's got to be exciting for him. Obviously, a lot of talk about Brandon Cisse, the NC State transfer from Sumter. I think he's going to be an excellent newcomer addition in the secondary. The big question is, Beamer mentioned this, on the back end would be the other safety spot. And Beamer said Peyton Williams was the guy coming out of spring, but you've got Kelvin Hunter, you've got David Bushey back there. DQ Smith starter at the other spot, but they're going to continue to compete for that safety spot. Dylan Stewart, I mean, that guy, we always talk about talent, and Dylan Stewart's got that. But the other thing about Dylan Stewart, I think it's lost, is he loves football. And he'll flat out say it, I love football. And, he said over and over at media days that kept emphasizing in his comments to get better against the run and get stronger. And I think he has. I mean, Beamer said they had the best strength staff in the country yesterday, and Beamer meant it. And so getting stronger is good because he's going to get a lot of attention this year. And you combine his strength with, improved strength with what he can do athletically, man, it's going to be fun to watch. I think that the other edge, that's another competition. Brian Thomas Jr., JT Gear, Desmond Umazulu, maybe a little George Wilson or Damon Clowney over there. Anthony Addison and Quay Dodd are true freshmen that can be good. That's, maybe even Devontae Miles at 280 pounds is a big end. But I think Brian Thomas Jr., based on the feedback that we've received, is likely starter there, but you never know. And then they're going to rotate. So Desmond and JT and some of those other guys will get lots of looks. The defensive tackle spot, you got it with Troy Pikes entering the chat. I think the conversation, first of all, there's two conversations with D tackle. The first conversation is, who are your two starters? Is it going to be Michael Goodwin and Nick Barrett? Is it going to be Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy and one of those two? The fourth spot, Xavion Hardy needs to continue to come on. I guess, goal activated for him. Had a good summer in the weight room. Again, best strength staff in the country, they say. Devontae Miles is a player that a lot of folks rave about. And then Troy Pikes from Georgia Southern, big recruiting win over Georgia and Ohio State, Atlanta kid. So he gets to make his Gamecock debut in his hometown. So who's that fourth guy? And will they rotate more than four? That's the question this year. Christian Ingram, true freshman, coming in, looking awfully good there. So that's going to be a battle up front. I think the front seven, from the look of it and what I hear, if they can avoid injuries, they've pieced it together nicely. But as Preston Thorne said on the morning show 1 week ago today, he was talking about this, and I mentioned it too. The guy to replace up front, Tonka Hemingway is irreplaceable. I actually think that Aiden Harris, the freshman they'll have coming in next year, is a Tonka replacement type. But they don't really have anybody like him. Smaller, not as big. And I think with the Raiders, he may be a strong a 3-4 end. Well, Pete Carroll, I think, will use him in that way. Um, a stronger guy, played well, had the knack for the big play. I mean, how many touchdowns Tonka Hemingway score for a defensive tackle? Love the guy. I mean, just a great player. But you don't have, unless it's Devontae Miles, you don't really have a guy that has that body type skill set, right now, at least not from what I can see. But the guy you got to replace, TJ Sanders. And Preston Thorne said this, and there's a short up on our YouTube channel. Please like, subscribe, and share. Where he talks about, you couldn't single block TJ last year. You had to double him because if you tried to single block him, good luck. And he did, man. TJ Sanders, I think from about the Georgia game in 2023 on, we knew he had special potential. But all year last year, I mean, that guy was a warrior. He's played the most consistent. Travian Robertson did a great job with him. So how do you replace him? Well, you got options. Could Montell Goodwine be good? I was told Montell Goodwine, pure talent wise, one of the best. Probably just as good as the guys last year. We know just pure talent wise, Gabriel Brown-Lodendi, athletic ability, size, all that's good. We know Nick Barrett. Gosh, I thought he looked a step and a half quicker in the spring than I've ever seen him look. And obviously he's emerged as a leader on the team. So those three guys, just keep them healthy. I think they can do some things this year, up front. I don't think it's nearly the concern on paper that a lot of people made it out to be, frankly. I think the one thing is, how do you replace the consistency, tenacity, and performance of a TJ Sanders? Because you have guys with that body type. You have guys that have the skill set TJ did. You don't have a Tonka skill set guy this year, which is fine because lots of teams don't. I mean, Tonka was kind of rare. You have Boogie Huntley replacements. Boogie was top 3. You have a DeAndre Jules replacement in theory with Gabriel Brown-Lodendi. Jules got hurt and didn't make the impact he wanted to, but can Christian Ingram as a true freshman make the same impact? I didn't mention Xavion Hardy when talking about the Tonka Hemingway skill set. He could be that guy. I'm gonna back up there. I mean, that guy, he is a little different. And up front, obviously, too, on the edge, you're going to miss Jaylen Brown. Injury report yesterday had him, Ryan Brubaker, Zabari Sandy, which I really hate. Sandy is kind of a forgotten man, had a really good spring. I put him second on my projected depth chart at nickel, although they're going to play Cisse there some in a pinch. But, yeah, he's out. Beamer said Caleb Williams, true freshman D tackle from Virginia, out. Said they were not short term. So they're going to be out for a while. So there's your 4 of the walking wounded to start with. Practice starts today. You're going to see guys with boots. And I mean, it's always a judgment call. And then you will have some overreaction, unfortunately. But then you also have some situations where, they maybe hide it a little better. And, you get to the game and, this guy's not there, can't go. So we'll see kind of what happens with all that, but there's your injury situation. So I said yesterday, kind of during the Smorgasbord segment with Alex on the show, when I look at the first 5 games of the schedule, I think it's very, very important that South Carolina's defense does not have like a significant drop off. Just because of the style of play, you got some quarterbacks in there that you're facing. Drones from Virginia Tech, obviously Diego Pavia, Missouri's Bo Priblia, that was at Penn State last year, that are these scrambling dudes that are hard. They can make you pay. Even when the play breaks down for them, they can make you play if you're not sound on defense. They're scramblers and pains in the butt. And so if the defense is, you know, not high enough of a level to start with, because I do think, given the youth and new players, it will get better as the season goes on. But you could lose. So I think it's important for the defense. I mean, everybody's going to talk about starting fast on offense because that's what everybody wants. And I get that, but Carolina's got to start fast on defense this year. Doesn't have to be dominant, but I think that's important. The good news is if you look at I guess, the struggles, offensively, I mean, in openers under Beamer, the last 3 years, and, because let's face it, in 2022, they beat Georgia State by 3 touchdowns, but that was a special team, 2 punt blocks for a TD, and offense really struggled. Defense settled in after a while, and then North Carolina, kind of disappointed by the defense in that one, especially in the third quarter. But that was rare because usually Clayton White's defenses second half end up doing good because of adjustments. But that was disappointing. Last year, big plays given up to Old Dominion. Other than that, I thought they played good. Heck, they won the game with a turnover. So the defense has started pretty well around here. And then the first game of the Beamer era was a shutout, although it was Eastern Illinois. But so I think they get. And I think starting well on there's not as much going on defense as there is offensively. The thing I'm concerned about with the opener with defense is what's Virginia Tech going to do? Are they going to try to go super fast and confuse a lot of good young players? And then you have drones, and then the running back they got from Bowling Green. They're kind of darting and slicing because you're out of position. That could be problematic. But we've got 30 days to talk about all that. So, I kind of went through everything, back end, front end, on defense, linebackers. There's your kind of overview right here on the first day of Carolina football practice. Hope you're excited. Complete coverage of what they let us see on thebigspur.com. Check it out. Use code TheShow50 to get a half off an annual membership, or if you pay full price monthly or annually, you can get Paramount Plus for free. And a lot of good shows on Paramount Plus. If you're a South Park fan, Paramount just paid them $1.5 billion to be kind of the home of South Park, and that's good. And all the Taylor Sheridan shows and NCAA March Madness because it's part of CBS and all that good stuff. And you can get all that for free if you join thebigspur.com. And I think $12.95 a month is the going rate for the monthly membership if you're not a member. Or you can get half off an annual with no Paramount Plus if you use code TheShow50. TheShow50. Bradford's going to be along at 10 a.m. to talk about Vegas over-unders, more football. Probably what's reported on thebigspur.com after practice. Then we'll have me and Phil and I. And the late night Gamecock Matt Anderson is in for Fantastic Friday. And it will be a fantastic Friday. Sports Talk with Phil Kornblut. Probably a lot of good stuff from camps from Clemson, Carolina, Coastal, wherever. 6 to 8 streaming on the Chief Sports app. Then the weekend gets here. And don't forget SEC Sunday night. Rob Williams, Craig McMichael. Lots of great guests as we continue to march toward week 1 in college football. Also, JC and Morgan we did yesterday. It's really good. Check that out as well. All right, folks, this has been Coffee with JC Shurburtt. I hope you're happy today on the first day of August and fired up about practice getting underway and the season being right around the corner. I know I am. Holla.